Welcome to Femme Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and this is your first little taste of Femme Furious Fully Loaded, which is our bonus episodes that will typically only be available on Patreon. But I didn't want to jump into The Last of Us Season 2 without at least touching on Season 1 all together as a collective, okay? So before we dive into anything mushroom related today, here's how you can call me, beat me. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you prefer, you can watch a full episode breakdown on YouTube. If you would like to follow the podcast on Instagram, we're over there. Just on Instagram, not on TikTok. I'm sorry. I'm a millennial. That is at Femme and Furious Pod. If you want to send me all of your mushroom-related thoughts, if you want to send me your thoughts and feelings about Pedro Pascal being the hottest person on planet Earth, okay, I am all ears, and I am ready to receive those emails in stride. You can email me at femmeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. Or if you want to join our community, we have a lovely community that is growing over on Patreon. That is our Two Femme, Two Furious. It's $10 a month. It gets you all of our fully loaded episodes, which is once a month at least. Okay, this one is out to the public, but generally these will only be available on Patreon. Gets you a 15% off of merch and live events. It includes Sunday Brunch, which is a monthly virtual hangout, movie nights, happy hours, trivia parties, etc. Ad-free episodes. You get the Suffragette Award, which means you get voting privileges on all episode topics, bonus content, and more. It includes Tea Time, which is our online chat, so if you want to stay connected with us all week long, you can. And it includes Fast Five, because how many Fast and Furious references can I make in a single pod? The answer is the limit does not exist. Fast Five is a weekly content roundup just to let us connect on what we're watching, what we're connecting with that week in pop culture. Okay, so that's all happening over in the Patreon. You can join over there. And with all of that being said, let's jump into this week's Femme Frame, which is a recap in its entirety of Season 1 of The Last of Us. We're going to start with key themes, and then we're going to dive into a synopsis of each episode, including fierce feminine moments from each episode. This, I think, goes without saying, but just in case you need to hear it, this is your spoiler warning for Season 1 of The Last of Us. If you have not seen The Last of Us, or seen Season 1 in its entirety, just know we're diving into all of it today. So kindly turn this off. Go and be a baddie who binges. Do Season 1, and then this podcast will be here when you return. Okay? Are you still here? Good, then let's dive in. I am going to preface the meat of this episode with the fact that I hate zombie shows. I don't mean to be dramatic, but the most horrific part of the show to me, outside of the very first scene and the cannibalism later on, is in episode 1 when the screen flashes and says 20 years later. I remember seeing that the first time around that I watched the show and being like, oh, hell no. Because who the fuck wants to endure 20 years of a zombie apocalypse? Certainly not me. Zombie apocalypse is perhaps the most egregious type of horror, in my opinion, because it's more psychological than it is physical. Like, in my humble opinion, what is it that we're fucking living for in a post-apocalyptic world? And why are we so obsessed with telling these stories? My will to live in a zombie apocalypse would be 0. Like, less than 0, but 0 if that's the lowest that we can go. Forever having to worry about turning into a zombie and incidentally killing the people that I love, or having them turn into zombies and being forced to kill them? No, thank you. No, thank you. That's not something I ever want to experience in this or literally any lifetime that I may live in. So while I hate zombie shows, I do love pop culture. And sometimes the juice for something in pop culture is just enough for me to engage with the material, simply because I think pop culture gives us an understanding of the world around us, right? So when there's a real hype for something that's out in the world that I might not personally like or enjoy, I almost always bite because I just want to see, what is this about? The Last of Us was one of those things. It just kind of like took off. From a pop culture standpoint, it has all of the right elements to garner success. It had familiarity in that there was a video game and it had a pretty solid following of fans from the video game. It has the creator of the game working on the TV show. It's on HBO's primetime Sunday night slot. And it's got talent that we love and that we're familiar with on HBO. It's got Pedro Pascal, who at the time was already getting a lot of love from The Mandalorian. Now, that's obviously not on HBO, but we knew of Pedro Pascal from the Game of Thrones series, okay? And it has Bella Ramsey, who we also are super endeared to from Game of Thrones. Like, literally all of the ingredients that it needs to be a smash hit are in the pot. And clearly, the show is. But the real reason why is because it can take the fear that I have, and that is like, what is it that I would have to live for in a zombie apocalyptic world? And it fleshes that concept out over the entire season. And the answer is so simple, right? It's love. But the way that The Last of Us takes us through this journey is a master class in storytelling. The first season has 4 key elements that really stand out to me: love, loss, sacrifice, and choice. Joel may be perceived as our main character, but his character means nothing without the women around him. That's Tess, Ellie, and Sarah. And like, no shade to Tess, but the real entire emotional arc of the show hinges on the absolute juxtaposition of Sarah and Ellie. Without these two girls, the entire story would fall flat. In the show's runtime, we only spend 34 minutes with Sarah, and we're designed to get attached to her character. One day I would love to play the video game, but I only have a PS1, and I will likely never have another gaming system in my life outside of a computer, so I'm not positive. But I'm pretty sure that the video game also opens with you playing from Sarah's POV. That's because her point of view is important. Sarah is here in the story to do what women do best in stories: get fridged. And even though that is marginally true, okay, if not even like majorly true, it is done in The Last of Us in a way that has such a profound impact, because her death isn't just to propel Joel's story forward. You feel the weight of Sarah's life and her death throughout the entirety of a season. So even though she's not on screen, she is an entity that is carrying the emotional arc of the story forward. You feel Sarah when you can see Ellie pointing out that Joel's watch is broken, right? Pretty early into Joel and Ellie meeting. You feel her life and her death when the Fedra officer threatens Ellie and Joel is like completely triggered from her death 20 years later. And these moments of Sarah's ghost keep brushing up against us each episode, and they're piling on top of each other until we get to the end of the season, which is why the payoff from that final moment with Joel and Ellie in the Fedra hospital is so satisfying, and it's so rich, because Sarah's ghost, her entity, her presence, her life, her death, is carrying us through episode after episode as these two forge their relationship. It's the idea of sacrifice that makes the biggest discrepancy between Ellie and Sarah. And in order to understand this, we really need to look at where we meet these two girls in space and in time within the show. Because we meet Sarah in 2003. It's post 9/11 world, and everything that starts to unfold, in all of the zombie-ness that starts to unfold, her first question to ask when they get into the car and they start to drive away is it terrorists? Because why would she be concerned about anything else? We obviously don't know what happened to her mother, but we can gauge that Sarah's content with her life. She has a really great rapport with Joel and Tommy, and even though she's got a bit of sass in there, she has a very soft character. And Joel even alludes to this later on. He's like, she was girly, not that you're not. And, Ellie's like, I'm not. So we get this very soft character. Sarah plays the role of a caretaker, and you get the impression that she enjoys the role. She wants to cook breakfast for Joel on his birthday. She wants to fix his watch that he won't fix. And I would love to say that she's getting put into this gender role because she's a girl, but I see a lot of my mom and I in Joel and Sarah. Joel would have been 22 when he had her. He was a young dad. I don't know. My mom had me at 21 and we grew up together. And of course, she's my mom and she took care of me. But I hope in many ways she would consider that I have taken care of her too. Because having a young parent just changes the dynamic. And I think this is a part of what their dynamic is. You don't get the impression that she's there and what she's doing is to particularly be gendered, but rather that it's a labor of her love for her father and for her uncle. And truthfully, Sarah is afforded the ability to be able to be the soft, sort of feminine character in the show. She's absolutely shocked and horrified when her dad kills the neighbor, right? Her world may not be perfect, but it doesn't require her to compromise her tenderness for survival, which is very different from every other female character that we meet on the show moving forward. Sarah relies on Joel for protection. When she gets hurt, she relies on Joel to carry her. And even then, the whole time he's telling her, like, don't look, keep your eyes on me. He's trying to protect her innocence, her femininity, her tenderness as much as possible. He's trying to preserve some of that for her, even though this incredibly horrific tragedy is unfolding in the beginning of the show. And ultimately, it's because he's trying to protect her, because he's willing to do anything for her, that he is willing to carry her, even though they're in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. And like, there's a zombie right on their tail at this one point when they come across the first US military person. Because he's carrying her, when they end up meeting that military officer who then opened fires, Sarah becomes a shield. She essentially saves Joel's life. Obviously, it's unintentional, but her death is a sacrifice that drives the story forward. Love, loss, sacrifice, and choice. Like, of course, Joel is going to be like, I love my kid. Of course, I'm going to carry her to safety. And in the end, the consequence of having to do so is what ultimately leads to her death, because she is now on the front line of the fire, the open fire that comes in. And I'm not saying that there was an alternative here for Joel or Sarah, but it's important to note that this is something that we have to be aware of, because we meet Ellie in completely different circumstances. Ellie is born in a world where there was never a before. Ellie only lives in the after. She only knows the world from this perspective. So we meet these two girls who are 14 years old, but because of their circumstances and the world that they're living in, they are just forced to be vastly different and to move about the world very differently. Ellie is gritty and rough around the edges. She's never had anyone to protect her. She's an orphan. She's raised by Fedra in this sort of very cold, unloving, militant setting, and it shows. She lives in a world where most people have lost their humanity. Just a little bit, if not a lot of it. And like, these are the pieces that we can agree are the most horrific parts of The Last of Us. It's not the zombies. It's the lack of humanity and compassion, the loss of the ability to humanize because everyone's just in survival mode. Ellie is never afforded the ability to just be a kid, to just be a girl, to just be soft or to be tender, because from the time she's born has to prioritize her safety every single day in a way that Sarah never did. So when Ellie finally meets Joel, it's with Ellie rushing at him with a knife, which is so vastly different from how we meet Sarah, who's serving eggs and making birthday plans and telling her dad and her uncle where Jakarta is, right? It's just so vastly different. And it's also really important for us to understand when we meet Ellie as a viewer, because The Last of Us season 1 dropped in the beginning of January 2023. So COVID is really fresh in our minds as we're watching the show. I don't know. I grew up less than an hour from where the Twin Towers fell, and that day had smoke in my backyard. And still, because I have also lived in the space and time between 2001 and now, I feel the weight of this trauma that Ellie is growing up in so much more. Like, the weight of the line, "Is it terrorists?" is key from Sarah as a historical part of understanding where we are in the show. It's only 2 years after 9/11 when we meet Sarah, but it doesn't pack the same emotional punch or the same fear, perhaps, as the idea of a global pandemic or global epidemic, because we're coming out of COVID at this point when we're watching the show. It's easy to resonate with Ellie and with her fear because the repercussions of a global pandemic are continuously, still today, actively shaping our modern society. But unlike Ellie, most of you listening to the show are also having an understanding of the before times. So you can draw on a before COVID and an after COVID, which is very different than Ellie, who doesn't have a before the zombie apocalypse, before cordyceps, to rely upon and to understand the world through, or to filter the world through. So if we take these 4 themes, love, sacrifice, loss, and choice, we get the entire arc for both Joel and for Ellie. Because when we meet Joel, we see the love that he has for Sarah and Tommy. We get a sense that he's a part of a community where he lives in Texas. We get Sarah's death and an unintentional sacrifice. We feel the weight of her loss throughout Joel's arc. But he makes 2 very important choices throughout the story. The first is to open up and to let in love again with Ellie. And we'll talk about that second choice in a minute. When we meet Ellie, she has also come from a similar cycle. She is in love with Riley, who ultimately Ellie is forced to sacrifice and eventually kill because of the infection. And the weight of that choice is what drives so much of Ellie's story. Like, from episode 1, she is obsessed with getting her hands on a gun. And then later on, you realize it's because of this moment with Riley. This one experience with Riley, who she's having her first young love experience with, the only person she's perhaps ever cared about intimately, all of the love and the loss that she has for her, and her fear of being put in a situation again without any protection because she doesn't have anybody to protect her. So it's what allows her to be so compliant when it comes to going to the Fireflies out west, because she's being driven into this part of her emotional arc when we meet her in going through the most traumatic loss of her life, because she doesn't have anybody else to have as a soundboard for, like, I've lost somebody and I've been okay, or I've lost somebody and I've moved forward. So we really meet these 2 characters, Joel and Ellie, who are in the pits of grief, who are just trying to survive in a world where day after day you are being forced to make difficult choices, to make difficult sacrifices in order to get to tomorrow. And it is through that experience that they get closer emotionally and build their bond. Ellie goes through the experience of love and loss, and her choices lead her to be willing to make the greatest sacrifice of all, her life, in order to save humanity from this infection that she has just watched tragically kill the love of her life. She's never had another love. This is her first love. So, and you know that first love, it hits so deep and so profoundly, and it's so rich. Especially when you don't have anybody else. Like Ellie, as an orphan, doesn't have anybody else. This one relationship is her saving grace, her silver lining in a world that's so shitty and so bleak. And she's willing to make this sacrifice because she has just had to kill this person because they have gotten infected. So it's driving her story forward. Does she necessarily know the full extent of what she will be sacrificing? Does she know that the sacrifice is ultimately going to be her life? Maybe, but maybe not. And she never really gets to make that choice because Joel takes it away. And it's his love of Sarah and his loss of Sarah and his willingness to let Ellie in and love her again and find that love again with somebody who is like a daughter to him. The very idea of having to endure her loss after living with Sarah's loss for 20 years completely overrides her idea of sacrifice, completely overrides her autonomy, her choice, essentially, because Joel makes it for her in that last and final scene in the hospital. And you don't get the emotional payoff of that moment. You don't get that payoff if you don't have all 34 freaking brilliant moments with Sarah to showcase the depth and the value of the relationship that develops between Ellie and Joel. So that's what I want to keep in mind as we go into season 2. With that being said, I want to go sort of beat by beat. We're not going to do a deep dive of each episode, but what we will do here is we will do a synopsis and the fierce key moments in each episode. We start with episode 1, When You're Lost in the Darkness. This is where we meet Joel, Sarah, and Tommy, who all miraculously avoid eating any carbs for an entire day, possibly being the most unrealistic part of the show. We see a day in the life of Sarah ahead of the outbreak, the beginning of the societal collapse that comes in the outbreak, and the absolute devastating death of Sarah at the hands of the U.S. military. We jump forward 20 years, we get a new world order where we see life in the QZ, or the quarantine zone, as operated by FEDRA, or the Federal Disaster Response Agency. FEDRA is opposed by the Fireflies, who are a revolutionary group whose slogan, "When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light," is the title of the episode. We meet Ellie, our young protagonist in the story, who we are discovering that is being held by Marlene, the leader of the Fireflies in the Boston QZ, after being bit 3 weeks prior, but not turning. Ellie wins our fierce feminist moment for the episode, being relentlessly tested by the Fireflies. And in her test to count to 10, she gave us this banger of a line: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, fuck you. We catch up to Joel, who is desperate to get to Tommy. Joel is partnered with Tess, and in exchange for supplies, the two agree to take Ellie to another set of Fireflies who are working on a vaccination, thinking that Ellie may be the missing link due to her immunity. On their way sneaking out of the QZ, they are discovered by Fedra, who tests all of them, revealing that Ellie is uniquely immune to cordyceps, to Joel and to Tess, and ultimately goes to kill Ellie and therefore triggers Joel with his flashback of Sarah's death, resulting in the very brutal killing of the Fedra officer. Rest in peace. Episode 2, Infected. Joel, Ellie, and Tess make their way to Massachusetts State House, but discover a ton of infected across their path, forcing them to take an equally risky alternative path where they encounter clickers. Terrifying. Clickers are like level up infected, and they can hear, but they can't see. So Tess reveals later on that in this scuffle that they have with the clickers, she has been bitten and ends up spiraling and begging Joel to complete this mission with Ellie, knowing that Ellie is the key and that she can save all of humanity, delivering the most heartbreaking line: "I've never asked you for anything, not to feel the way I felt," giving us a ton of insight about her relationship with Joel without really giving us much history outside of the few minutes, really, between episode 1 and episode 2 that we spend with her. The group travels on, Tess included. They make it to the State House, only to discover that the Fireflies are dead as fuck, okay? In the process of figuring out what they're going to do next, they wake up hundreds hundreds of infected, okay? Because one thing that we need to remember about The Last of Us is that the infected are all interconnected. They live in a web like a hive mind. So waking up one could potentially wake up hundreds, and they will know where you are, and they will come and they will fuck you up. Okay, so they wake up hundreds of infected. They have like less than a minute to get the fuck out of there. Tess makes the ultimate sacrifice in the most horrific kiss of death ever witnessed on TV. It's gruesome. You'll have nightmares about it. Episode 3. Long time. Ellie and Joel start to make their way to Bill and Frank's, but not before Ellie calls Joel out for his resentment and his grief of Tess, claiming to him, "You needed a truck battery or whatever. You needed me and you made a choice, so don't blame me for something that isn't my fault." Pedro Pascal, as Joel, gives a subtle nod here, and it's sexy and it's hot, and it's why we call him our slutty little daddy, okay? After coming to a truce, Joel answers Ellie's questions about the before times. They see planes, they see all sorts of different stuff. He starts to explain how the crash of society happened, and we get a lot of flashbacks from those times, including Bill and Frank. We meet Bill of the Bunker, as I like to call him, who catches Frank in one of his traps. The two end up falling in love, and we get one of the most beautiful love stories of not just surviving, but thriving amidst the apocalypse. The two live a very full life, which includes a friendship and a business partnership with Joel and with Tess. Frank, who is sick, ends up asking Bill to help him commit suicide, essentially, to which Bill decides to join him, saying, "I'm old, I'm satisfied," and the two die in each other's arms, Romeo and Juliet style. Out of options and inspired by Bill's final letter to him, Joel concedes to bringing Ellie with him out west to find his brother Tommy, and from there they will find the Fireflies. Episode 4. Please Hold My Hand. After begging for 3 episodes in a row, episode 4 opens with Ellie finally having her gun, holding it in the mirror, being a badass that she stole this gun from Bill's house. Joel and Ellie begin making their way out west. On their way, they are attacked by hostile survivors who have left the QZ. In a tussle, one man attacks Joel, and Ellie uses her newfound contraband to kill that man, effectively saving Joel's life. They are now mutual protectors in their relationship. We also meet Kathleen, the leader of a resistance movement, who is looking for revenge on a man named Henry, who we learned has killed her brother. Joel and Ellie find a safe space to hide out, and they are woken up in the midst of their sleep in their hiding spot, and they are being held at gunpoint as the episode ends. Episode 5. Endure and Survive. We meet Henry and Sam, who we learn are hiding from the resistance and want to partner with Joel and Ellie in order to effectively leave the city. We also learn that in the past, right after the outbreak, Fedra drove all of the infected underground and effectively killed them. So while it seems like a dangerous path, our foursome is prepared to head down into the tunnels in order to escape. However, Kathleen has ramped up efforts to catch Joel and Henry. And in their attempt to escape, our group is discovered by Kathleen and her resistance cronies, and surprise! In the fight, they discover that the infected are very much alive, leading to a huge swarm of them to attack, meeting our bloater for the first time, a horrific, huge zombie mushroom man. It's disgusting, it's scary, it's gruesome. I love it. Our group does make it to safety, where we see Sam and Ellie are reading a comic, getting the title line of the episode and a huge quote from the video game, Endure and Survive. Sam reveals to Ellie that he was bit in the fight and now he is infected. Ellie, knowing that she is immune, cuts herself open, smears blood all over Sam, hoping to cure his infection too. She falls asleep in the morning, and then she discovers that Sam has turned and he attacks Ellie. Henry beats Joel to the one gun that they have, recognizing that his brother has turned, shoots him in like an effort to save Ellie's life. It's instinctual. And in his shock, he then kills himself, unable to live with what he's done, effectively living out my aforementioned worst nightmare of the zombie apocalypse. Henry and Sam is literally the embodiment of everything that I would never want to fucking deal with if the zombie apocalypse broke out. That's episode 5. Episode 6, Kin. We get a time jump with Joel and Ellie trekking onwards in their journey now in the midst of winter. On their journey, they discuss Sally Ride, who, if you were not aware of who Sally Ride is, she is an astronaut who was absolutely patronized when she was sent to space with 100 tampons for a 1-week journey. Now, if you're a man and you're listening to this show, welcome and kudos. But spoiler alert, that's way too many tampons. The pair, Joel and Ellie, are discovered by a group who use attack dogs to suss out whether or not Jolie, that's their ship name, whether or not Joel and Ellie are infected. Joel freezes as the dog approaches Ellie, going into panic mode. Panic attack unfurling. But the dog is essentially just like Fluffy, the 3-headed dog from Harry Potter, but instead of music, this dog in the zombie apocalypse show can seemingly be subdued by Scritch. It's essentially what Ellie ends up doing with this dog. We meet Maria. Maria brings this duo back to Jackson, where there is a thriving community. We learn that Tommy and Maria are married and they are forging a peaceful community where, much to Ellie's dismay, children don't get guns. Tommy and Joel go to catch up over a drink, where Tommy reveals the location of the Fireflies and that he's going to be a daddy. Elsewhere, Maria gives Ellie a super fucking purple coat, a haircut, and a diva cup, which is much more resourceful in a zombie apocalypse and easier to carry than 100 tampons, like Ellie's hero, Sally Ride. Joel and Tommy finally reconcile, and Joel tells Tommy that he is afraid to get Ellie killed. Ellie overhears the entire conversation, which leads to a huge fight between Joel and Ellie, resulting in Joel's inability to leave Ellie behind, and the two end up leaving Jackson together to find the Fireflies. We get a montage of the pair as they begin to bond on a deeper level before reaching Salt Lake City, where they are attacked and Joel is severely wounded. Episode 7, Left Behind. Ellie gets a very seriously injured Joel to safety, and in his delirium, he tells Ellie to get to safety and to leave him behind. While she considers her options, we get a flashback of her life before Joel, where she is attending a Fedra school, and she has a seemingly miserable experience where we learn that she has no friends, regularly spends time in whatever the hole is, and we learn that she's bullied. Her only friend, Riley, is discovered to have been recruited to the Fireflies and ends up forcing Ellie to join her for one final night of fun. The two go to the mall, where Ellie discovers the 5 wonders of the before times, which include escalators, a carousel, an old photo booth, an arcade, and a Spirit of Halloween. It's not really said if it's a Spirit of Halloween or not, Spirit Halloween, but that's what it is, right? Tension of all kind rises over the episode, resulting in the two getting into an argument when Riley reveals that she's leaving Boston to go to the Atlanta QZ and be a part of the Fireflies there. Ellie storms off, but she ends up returning when she hears screaming, which only turns out to be a toy from the Halloween store. Ellie and Riley reconcile, and they end up sharing their first kiss, which is abruptly interrupted by an infected who bites both girls. The two hold hands and decide to be all poetic and shit and turn together. Only Riley turns, which forces Ellie to shoot and kill her. This is where Ellie discovers that she is immune, but it's at the cost of her first love and her best friend. When time flashes back forward into the present, Ellie decides to stay with Joel and scours the house for medical supplies. Ellie reassures Joel that she's not leaving him behind, further solidifying their bond as she begins to stitch his wound closed. Episode 8. When We Are in Need. Perhaps the most chilling episode of TV I have ever watched, which opens with some sort of funeral being held by some sort of religious group led by this guy, David. Joel has contracted a fever, and Ellie leaves to go and find food. She manages to hunt a deer, which is nearly stolen by the leader, David, and his friend, James. Ellie barters with the two of them, offering them half the deer in exchange for medicine. David sends James to go get the medicine while he waits with Ellie, and the two begin to talk, resulting in him telling her a story about this crazy man, i.e. Joel, who kills their friend Alec, the person whose funeral we were witnessing in the beginning of the show. Startled that David knows them, Ellie takes the medicine when James gets back and runs to Joel. David and James return to their resort, which is where they're living with their community, with the full deer. But we already see that Joyce is cooking, and despite the fact that she says it's venison, the deer is seemingly untouched, leading us to understand that they are in fact eating Alec, the dead man from the beginning of the episode. Gag. David and James lead a group to go hunt down Joel, and because he is still weakened, Ellie attempts to lead the group away from Joel, resulting in her getting captured. She's thrown off her horse, knocked out, and she awakens in a cell where David attempts to sway her with food, but upon spotting a bloody ear, Ellie refuses. David, a grown man, attempts to seduce Ellie, gross, which leads her to breaking his finger and tries to steal the keys off of his belt. Clever girl. It fails though, and the two of them begin to fight, and with blood dripping down her face, Ellie delivers the most badass line. Tell them that Ellie is the little girl who broke your fucking finger. You're welcome for that performance. We flash to Joel, who begins to come to consciousness after a few doses of penicillin and begins to realize that not only is he in danger, but that Ellie is gone and she's probably in danger. We see Joel go full psycho. We've heard about him doing this the entire series, but we've never really seen it because we see this very tender, warm bond that he's creating with Ellie, but he ties up and tortures two men to discover wherever Ellie's location is. David and James, back over at the resort, throw Ellie onto the butcher's block, prepared to kill her, and therefore probably eat her. She is a tiny little girl, probably just a snack for the two of them. Ew, okay? And in this struggle to get her to the butcher's block, she bites David. And again, the badass that Ellie is with blood running down her fucking face, Ellie reveals that she is infected, and now David is too. They find her bite mark, and while they're preoccupied discussing what they're going to do, because the bite mark is real, Ellie takes the butcher's knife, kills James, and escapes to the restaurant in the resort, which ends up catching fire. David begins to stalk her. He begins to taunt her. And eventually, Ellie charges at him, but David overpowers her, prepares to rape her. She ends up getting free, and then she graphically, and I do mean graphically, kills him too. She escapes outside where Joel finds her, and the two share a hug after being absolutely traumatized, and we hear Joel say, baby girl, something that he has not called anybody since his daughter. Our hearts melt. The story starts to round out and become complete. Episode 9, last episode, Look for the Light. This final episode gives us a flashback of Ellie's birth, where she is delivered literally in the midst of an attack from an infected. Her mother, who is a firefly, insists that she was bitten after the cord was cut, but we know this isn't true. This is ultimately what leads to her immunization. And then we see Marlene take Ellie to safety, shoots the mother as a courtesy who's begging for death instead of turning into a fucking zombie. And this brings us then to the future. Flashes forward, okay? It brings us to springtime. We see how much time has passed in the span of the show. And in an abandoned bus station, Ellie discovers a giraffe. We just see her starting to come to life again in this moment after she's just had such a traumatic encounter with David. And in seeing her joy, Joel offers Ellie the option to just go back to Jackson. They can go back, they can live a simple and quiet life, and Ellie agrees to follow Joel anywhere after she sees this mission through. The two bond some more, with Joel sharing his near suicide after Sarah's death, and Ellie sharing having to kill Riley. Eventually, the two reach the medical center, where they are smoke-bombed, knocking them both out. Joel wakes up in a hospital bed, with Marlene congratulating him on completing the mission, and offering up that Ellie's immunity could lead to a cure for cordyceps once and for all. Marlene tells Joel that Ellie is being prepared for surgery, which prompts a very sleepy Joel, who's just been knocked out by a sleep bomb, to start to put the pieces together that cordyceps takes root in the brain, and that the Fireflies are planning on essentially killing Ellie in pursuit of a vaccine. So while they begin to escort him out, Joel attacks the Fireflies, he steals their gun, and goes on an absolute love-inspired rampage to get Ellie out of the OR. He is confronted then by Marlene after killing like a fuck ton of people. Okay, so episode 8, episode 9, we are really seeing what a fucking psycho Joel could be. He is confronted by Marlene as he has got a drug-induced Ellie, hospital gown and all, in his arms. And she asks, what would Ellie want to do? And we already know through the conversation earlier in the show that she wanted to see this mission through. But ultimately, Joel takes that decision away from her and then kills Marlene in the process before driving away. A little bit later, when Ellie awakens, Joel lies to her saying that raiders attacked the facility, that they're no longer looking for a cure, a bunch of stuff that doesn't really make a ton of sense when it all strings together. And sensing his dishonesty and succumbing to her own feelings of survivor's guilt from Riley and from Tess and from Sam and Henry, Ellie asks Joel to swear that he is telling the truth about his version of events. And the season concludes with him maintaining the lie by saying, I swear. And that is the end of season 1. So let's dive into our burn book. Okay? Bold and Bothered award for the entirety of all of season 1 is clearly when Ellie yells at David, tell them that Ellie is the girl who broke your fucking finger. That line is so good. I love it so much. Shiro award goes to Tess and her ultimate sacrifice when she lets the infected tendrils of death enter her mouth. Ew, it is the most disgusting display of sacrifice ever witnessed, but it's so good and the moment is so rich. So she gets our Shiro award. The Femme Fatale award. I'm giving this award to Kathleen, who is so hell-bent on her rage, yet still a leader of her people to follow. Speak Your Truth trophy. Sam asking Ellie if she's afraid, and she responds with, I'm afraid of ending up alone. It's just such a rich moment. She starts by joking around. She's like, I'm afraid of scorpions, right? And, you know, she ends up with this very real, very vulnerable moment where she says, I'm afraid of ending up alone, because she's been alone and she's just had to kill Riley, and she's starting to develop this bond with Joel, and this is her fear, that she's going to end up alone, especially now knowing that she's immune in a world, the only one that we know of, that she's the only one that she knows of, that is immune to a disease that is taking and killing everyone she loves, including her parents, including the love of her life so far. Okay, her best friend has taken one of her protectors in Tess, and then ends up claiming, you know, Sam. Shortly after this, we discover that too, and she like rapidly puts her blood on him because she just wants to preserve this and doesn't want to end up alone in a world that is slowly being taken over by cordyceps, where she has immunization. and I just think it's so beautiful. It's so nuanced and it's so rich. So her Speak Your Truth trophy, for her to be vulnerable like that, I think is wonderful. And then our honorary heartthrob. When Ellie claims time heals all wounds, she's being facetious about it. She's like, I guess that time heals all wounds. And Joel responds with, it wasn't time that did that. And he's obviously talking about this relationship that he's developed with Ellie, and that she is the one who has healed this wound of his daughter's death, and that she is the one who has pulled him out of his grief and his depression and his loss. And the weight of that, as it sits between them, it's not a romantic moment. Obviously, they're not romantic counterparts, but that moment just pulls at my heartstrings. And Pedro Pascal is just so perfect as Joel. He is so perfect in this role. And he delivers this line with such precision and just so much love and tenderness that even though they're not romantic counterparts, their love cannot be discredited. And this moment right here, it's not an I love you. It's not the same type of thing, but it is his acknowledgement of that. I love you and I care about you. It wasn't time that healed this wound of the most painful and traumatic thing that I will ever go through in my life, the loss of my daughter. It's you. You're the one who did that. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. That is our roundup of all of season 1 of The Last of Us. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Femme Furious. If you like the episode, if you like The Last of Us, if you know somebody who likes The Last of Us, share this episode out. Leave a review. Let other people know that you're listening to it. That's going to help the podcast grow exponentially, and I will forever be grateful for it. I also want to let you know that I am having a launch party. That's on April 12th at 11 a.m. It's completely virtual. There is a link to join in the show notes. You can just show up. It's completely free for you. We will have prizes. We will have games. We're just going to hang out and celebrate the beginning of this journey for me and for us as a community. Okay? I'll be back here on Thursday with a deep dive into curves in culture. And then on next Monday, our Last of Us Season 2 coverage will start. So I will see you back here soon. And remember, the fungus loves too. Bye!